Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the 4 o'clock News and Politics show this Wednesday. A woman who needs very little introduction, Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. Thank you for coming into the studio today.
Thanks, Kate.
Appreciate it. Lots going on. A release from the office today we'll get to in a little bit. But as you said, right here, very close by, you want to talk about at the State Archives, 150 years of big ideas
That's
and Little Rhodey.
That's right. It's a great new exhibit that we have. It's probably our 7th or 8th even, that we've done at the Rhode Island State Archives. A lot of people, when I came in as Secretary of State, didn't know that we have this amazing collection of almost 4 centuries of records. It's something very few other states have. This particular exhibit focuses on 150 years of big ideas in the business community, because Rhode Island actually has had a long history of innovation in industry. And so you can come by and look at some old patent models. You can look at incorporation papers for things like, some of the companies that we've had for a long time. It's really quite nice. But really what I'm trying to do through that exhibit and the other ones that we've had is to show Rhode Islanders the richness of records and history that we have, and really trying to make a compelling case along with the activities that we're doing in schools all over Rhode Island to promote Rhode Island history and Rhode Island civics, and really promote the need for a real state archives and Rhode Island history center. So, which we've done a site selection study for, and we would hopefully place right across from the State House. It turns out we have over 10,000 students that come every year to the State House. If your kid is not one of those kids, you can call my office and we can set up the class. Or you can go on our website, which is sos.ri.gov. And so what we want to do is to show people that we have the kind of thing that would really be an anchor to historic tourism in the state. Other places have it, and they don't have as much history as we do. Massachusetts has a fabulous building, and yet their history is not one of inclusiveness and tolerance. I think it is time for our country to realize that we were the birthplace of freedom of religion. And what better place to do it through a facility that actually hosts and shows off our records.
So when you first saw this exhibit, I'm sure you were working alongside them as well, but what was your reaction? Did you have any wow kind of surprise moments?
The most amazing thing for me is, so for example, there is this one letter by Anne Franklin, who is Benjamin Franklin's sister-in-law and owned the Newport Mercury Tribune, which is the newspaper in Newport. So back during Revolutionary times, Rhode Island had a female owner publisher of a newspaper.
Wow.
And she was petitioning the General Assembly to be able to be the printer for their acts. And so we have this really wonderful treasures of, it's like our own little time capsule that we get to go into to check to see what things were like. And I think it also gives, at times like these that we're facing in our country, where things are so stressful and seem so, and sometimes some really, really almost hopeless because we're so against each other and stuff, that there have been other moments in Rhode Island, and not just Rhode Island's history, but our country's history, and people have come up with solutions, and then we've changed course. And so I think it shows that hope.
Gives that broader picture sometimes to get out of your myopic view of where things are at right now. But 150 years of big ideas in Little Rhodey. Let's talk about this year. Just released from your office was your 2019 legislative agenda, and I just want to go through your 3 kind of bucket items. Let's talk about early in-person voting.
Yes, this is my 5th attempt to get this done. Hopefully it will be my last. And it really responds to something Rhode Islanders want, right? So we've seen an increase, and I brought the numbers. From 2014 to 2018, we saw an increase of 119% in emergency mail ballots.
Wow.
That's the process where you have to go 20 days before the election. It kind of looks like an early in-person voting, but it's not, because you have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and you don't see your ballot go into that voting machine. And so if something's wrong with your ballot, you don't get to fix it. You lose your vote. So we want to make sure that Rhode Islanders have confidence in the system, and part of that is to have early in-person voting. You would come in 20 days before the election, just like you do now, and you show your ID, you get checked in, you're given a ballot, you fill it out, and you put it into the machine yourself. That's the beauty of it. And so I think, like I said, all over Rhode Island, I'm seeing increases like this. There are communities like Westerly and Central Falls that have actually told people, come in on, this weekend or come in at this time so that you can help reduce the lines on election day. My bill would provide for Saturday and Sunday, 4 hours on a Saturday, 4 hours on a Sunday, for people to come in and do their early voting. It's time for it.
And as you said, looking to hopefully be a fifth time the charm. Why the opposition?
Change in the election system is hard to begin with. Some people were concerned about the cost. I think we've answered those issues. Just trying to make sure that we provide that opportunity. I think this is something Rhode Islanders want. And, I think as they've seen the increase, right? Because at the beginning when I first introduced it, people were like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Well, you're seeing the demand. 119% increase is clearly a demand. So.
And talking about timing, let's talk a little bit about moving Rhode Island's primaries.
The shame. Yes. So I have now informed the General Assembly, and this is part of the reason why I introduced the bill last year as well, but this year it's for real. We will not be able to meet federal law this year, next year with the elections. The federal law requires that we send out ballots to uniformed overseas people at least 45 days before the general election, so that they have time to get the ballot and then get it back to us. Well, the problem is that because of the timing of our close primary to the general election, and now you have the auditing process that needs to happen as well, the risk limiting audits, there just isn't that time. And so I'm petitioning through this legislation that the General Assembly move the primary from September to the third Tuesday in August after the first Monday. So around the third week. So it's not Victory Day week. It's actually the following week, hopefully.
That's interesting. Yeah. You mentioned that Rhode Island could be, as you said, in violation of federal election law. So this isn't something that you're going to have to do some twisting. I mean, does it seem like there's no choice?
Well, I would hope that people would see it this way. I mean, my brother's a colonel in the U.S. Army. I feel very deeply, as I know many of our elected leaders do, that our military men and women who are fighting out there for our right and for our freedom have that opportunity. And I wouldn't want Rhode Island. Rhode Island's only one of 2 states that are left with this late primary. Yep. We need to do this. We need to do this year so that next year, which is a presidential year, we make sure that we protect the right to vote of our military.
What would happen if we didn't do it?
So we would probably get a reprimand from the Department of Justice. I don't want to be there when that happens. So I'm hoping that we don't have to deal with it.
Get a reprimand. That seems, but so it would just be a slap on the wrist?
My office is right now looking into it, but it's more than just the violation. It's really that it really affects the ability of our uniformed men and women who are abroad to be able to exercise their right to vote.
So what would happen then if we didn't change it? Would their votes be counted?
Their votes would be counted. It's just not, we wouldn't be confident that they would be able to get us their ballots in time.
Yep.
So they're counted as long as they get to us before the deadline, which I think is 8 p.m. on election day.
But just some concern about the suppression, if you will, not getting it in time.
Of getting that, yeah.
Speaking of voting, one of the other facets of your legislative agenda, one that affects a large number of Rhode Islanders, because as we know, majority of Rhode Islanders are unaffiliated voters, pertains to the unaffiliated status and what happens when someone goes into a primary, then forgets to disaffiliate and has a whole headache when they go to vote later on.
2 years later, they go to vote as an independent and they're told, nope, you can't do that because you are already in this party. So this bill, again, listening to Rhode Islanders as I go around, they said, why do I have to disaffiliate on the way out? I want to remain an independent voter. Why don't we just keep it that way? And then if I want to stay, then I would fill out the paperwork. So this bill would basically allow for that. It would say if you're an independent voter, you can choose whichever primary, but then on the way out, you wouldn't have to disaffiliate. You would just stay unaffiliated unless you make an affirmative action to actually stay in the party. And it also would change right now, the period of disaffiliation is 95 days before a primary. And very few people have it in their heads 95 days before a primary to either disaffiliate or to check their affiliation. What usually happens is people will check, the week or 2 weeks before the primary.
And go, oh no, I didn't need the 95 days.
I didn't. I can't change. So this would make it the same as voter registration, which is too long. It's 30 days, but that's in the Constitution, and at least it would make those deadlines the same.
The same. Yeah.
Your voter registration deadline and your disaffiliation deadline would match.
So I have to ask you while I have you in here, because I know some press is asking you about the release of the voter database.
Yes.
So can you talk to us about the status of that?
So actually, that's my third bill that I've introduced, and I've actually made a point of saying that at the time to the Journal, we want to have this debate in the public square. Absolutely. So right now, the general laws do not give any guidance as to what should be the release of information from the public voter file. So let's just do it. Let's just introduce a bill, have that conversation, and have the legislature give guidance as to what information. I believe that people, and what I've heard uniformly across Rhode Island is, thank you, Secretary Gorbea, for protecting our identity from theft. They understand that having released a voter database with just the year of birth in a electronic format that aggregates all of the voters is enough information to hold the secretary accountable. You don't need a full date of birth. The full date of birth has really become much more of an asset to people who are trying to do identity theft than it was 15 years ago when this practice started.
So if that is in fact the sticking point, is there a middle ground? Could there just be the date of year of birth?
I offered that middle ground. I basically, what I said was, instead of giving you a full data, like a CD or a DVD with all of the voters' dates of birth, I will only give you that information with year of birth.
Yeah.
And with year of birth, you can pretty much determine, and we ran the numbers, 99.5% of the records are available as individuals. There's always some people who maybe were born in the same year, John Smith. I get it, but then you can actually go into my office and we will show you that information. I just don't want to give everybody in the universe this data that they can then match with other things on the dark web and really put in danger the identity of Rhode Islanders. And so I had to balance. It was one of the toughest decisions I made in my 4 years, was that balancing act between open records and transparency. And what we came up with, I think, meets open records because it gives you a ton of information to hold the Secretary of State accountable with, while at the same time protecting the rights of individuals to their privacy.
Do we know the other states where they stand on this release of information?
Over half of the states only give year of birth.
Okay. So there's a precedent.
There is. Well, I would say there's a ton of other people who believe like we do.
Okay. And then finally, while I have you here, the office just got some national recognition.
Yes, it's very exciting. The National Association of Secretaries of State chose us, along with 2 other states, for their Ideas Award. So we're finalists in this contest that really highlights good ideas by the Secretary of States across the country. Ours happened to be in the area of civic education, a passion of mine. And we also got national recognition for 2 of our star employees. And so Rob Rock, our elections director, is now part of the executive committee of the National Association of State Elections Directors.
Okay.
And our state librarian, who I know you've probably spoken to, and all of the journalists and a lot of people rely on for great information, Megan Hamlin Black, has been awarded is one of 50 librarians across the country. So there's one in every state. She's the one in Rhode Island for an American Library Association award. And so she's getting a new leaders kind of training. It's really fantastic. And it shows the quality of employees and the leadership that we have at the Department of State. So I'm very proud to give them a shout out.
Well, and to make sure that we recognize them, we had you here in studio. So between covering the exhibit at the Rhode Island State Archives, 150 years of big ideas in Little Rhodey, to legislation that the office is looking at this year, I think we have run the gamut, and I appreciate your taking the time to come in.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Okay.
Take care.
Secretary Gorbea, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center.